I'm Brett Tolman, and I've been, it seems like, working in criminal law for forever. It's been over 25 years. I served in the U.S. Attorney's Office as a federal prosecutor. I then went back to Washington, D.C., served as chief counsel in the Senate Judiciary over crime and terrorism issues. Got to see some crazy, amazing things: interrogations at Guantanamo Bay, corruption investigation in Moscow. Led a lot of efforts to try to fix the national criminal justice system. I then became the U.S. Attorney. I was appointed by President Bush. Just a phenomenal experience with him. You'll like that. My one opportunity to ride in the motorcade with the president, I was in car 13, and I asked him who's so important that's in 1 through 12. And it's like hazmat and things like that. So it told me where my place was. But when I met the president again after making me U.S. Attorney, he walked up to me and he said, "Hey, Brett, are you glad I made you?" And I'm like, "Sir, are you glad I made you U.S. Attorney? Nobody else did that. I did that." So I'm very fond, and I guess that put me on a path to be working in Texas. I served in that capacity, and then afterwards was convinced by a very persuasive Texan, Doug Deason, to be the executive director of Right on Crime. And it's something that I know the Lord put in my path, and I'm grateful for my wife supporting me in that. And it's allowed me the opportunity to serve all across this country and to try to influence conservatives to take interest in changing the criminal justice system, because I think if the conservatives are there, we'll always keep in mind public safety, and we won't base any change of the criminal justice system on emotion. And so that's been my objective in doing that. Several months ago, I was asked and given the honor by Speaker Phelan to be the only non-elected member in the Texas legislature to serve on the interim committee on criminal justice reform, which was chaired by Representative Leach. He proudly serves the citizens of the House District 67, and in his fifth term. Sixth term. Yeah. No gray. Where's the gray in the beard? For the 87th legislative session, Representative Leach was appointed by Speaker Phelan to serve a second term as chairman of the House Committee on Judiciary and Civil Jurisprudence. Additionally, he was selected to serve on the House Committee on Juvenile Justice and Family Issues. He successfully authored legislation giving Texas judges a much-needed pay raise without raising legislator pensions, bolstered our state's judiciary with the creation of 17 new courts across the state, implemented various reforms to improve access to courts and consolidate court fees to promote fairness and transparency. Representative Leach graduated from Baylor University, law degree SMU, currently practices at the law firm of Gray, Reed, and McGraw. Warm hand for Representative Leach being here. And Honorable David Cook is the state representative for the Texas House District 96, sworn in January 2021. Is that right? Prior to being elected to the Texas House, David served as mayor of Mansfield from May 2008 until 2021. That's a lot of re-elections. Representative Cook has been assigned by Speaker Phelan to serve on the Criminal Jurisprudence and the Juvenile Justice and Family Issues Committees. He graduated with his bachelor's from Stephen Austin State University and earned his law degree from Texas A&M. Please welcome Representative Cook. So I'll turn it over to them to tell us, to get the discussion started. I think I'd really like for them to talk about why they have such a keen interest in looking at changing the criminal justice system and how they want to go about, and then we'll get into what the interim committee was all about. I'll tell you, though, my favorite moment on the interim committee was when I'm sitting up on the dais, and we've gone through, and one of the representatives leans over and looks at me and goes, "Who are you?" And I said, "I'm Brett," and thankfully I think Chairman Leach picked up on it and quickly introduced me to the crew. They thought I was, someone off the streets that wandered into the dais. But let me ask you both, what drives you? What about the criminal justice system is, are you focused on personally? And then let's get into a discussion about the interim committee.
Brett, thank you. It's an honor to share the stage with you, and of course to be here with my good friend Representative Cook, who's vice chairing now the Criminal Jurisprudence Committee in the Texas House. And good to see all of you today. I believe strongly that criminal justice reform is a unique area where conservatives can and have led and are leading and making a tremendous difference in this country, starting right here in the state of Texas. Our fundamental duty as lawmakers, policymakers, elected officials is to protect the rights and liberties of the people, to ensure that their constitutional rights and liberties are safeguarded. Yes, to work towards to ensure public safety, the safety of our communities and streets and schools, and supporting law enforcement, locking bad guys up, getting guys who don't need to be on the streets off the streets, and but where we can, protect the rights and liberties of the people, to keep families together, to get dads back at home with their kids and out of prison for crimes that maybe people might be, mad at them instead of scared at them, to offer second chances where we can. So many areas where it's just such a unique area for conservatives to lead on. And so much of what we've seen across this country, including what was celebrated, what it was accomplished during the Trump administration, was birthed right here in the state of Texas. So much of it from TPPF. I see my good friend Doug Deason here this morning. Doug and so many like him. Brett, you, of course, have helped lead the charge, and we've accomplished a lot, but we have so much left to do, and I think this session is going to be a historic session for criminal justice reform in the House.
Thank you. Representative Cook.
Yeah, thank you, Brett. And first, I'd be remiss if I know you were talking about yours and Chairman Leach's spouse earlier, and so I just want to publicly say I outkicked my coverage as well with my wife Tanya, so make that clear. But I would say, in answering your question, Brett, was that why this this issue, and quite frankly, it was just because that's where Speaker Phelan found that I would be best able to serve. And so when as a freshman, which the last session was my first year, obviously, and so you put down what you want, but then you get what you get. And I considered it a blessing because I really didn't know what to expect. I don't do any criminal law as a lawyer. I practice civil like Jeff does, and so it was something new for me. And the other committee that I have is juvenile justice, family issues, and so that one I was more familiar, and I'm board certified in family law, and so that was a more natural fit. But with this issue, I didn't really know what to expect, and I remember meeting Doug early on in the process, and just hearing his story, and to be honest, Doug, I mean, it really was it was something that drove me to work on this issue. So I do want to say thank you for your leadership in this arena as well. But I think that what I learned is this is one of those issues, and we often talk about politics getting in the way, but this is an opportunity where the left kind of wraps around and meets with the right when it wraps around, and sometimes that we hear that conversation when you're talking about libertarians or something like that, but not to put any labels on it, but just to say that this is an issue where you're not only doing the right thing from a humanitarian standpoint, but it also actually becomes accidentally a workforce issue. One of the biggest issues that we have in our state, and I know Chairman Leach, you see this, and people coming through our office, regardless of the industry, everybody is short on workers, and so there are a lot of people that need jobs as they come out of the prison system, and I do want to commend TDCJ and say that they're doing a great job of preparing individuals and allowing them to interview before they leave the system, because the primary thing that we need to focus on in this arena is definitely recidivism. And so if we're doing a good job as people leave TDCJ, they're not only going to have a driver's license with an address that's not Huntsville, Texas, but an address where they live, and they have a job and they have a place to stay, then the chances of them becoming productive members of our society are much higher. So that's what I've learned over the last 2 years, and I really want to say thank you for the opportunity to Speaker Phelan for allowing me to serve on the interim committee, not only on criminal jurisprudence last session and this session, but also really enjoyed serving with Chairman Leach and you, Brett, as well on that committee. It was an eye-opener for me, and I just look forward to continuing to do good work in this space. So thank you.
Yeah, I think about it, and you both kind of hit on this, the importance of it, but I was struck when I first came to the very first committee meeting. And I'd like you, Chairman Leach, if you will, to give a perspective of what this committee was. What you took from it now, looking back. Maybe what you think the the important things that occurred there. But we walked into the anteroom there, and remember, my experience has been back in the halls of Congress in D.C. and then in many legislatures across the country. And I'd never seen this. This was an absolute first. I saw Democratic representatives and Republican representatives have a moment of prayer. I'd never seen that before, ever. And it told me that there was, they're going to disagree, and there was a lot of disagreement at times. And there was, you roll up sleeves and you let each other know. But that was new. It was unique. It was powerful. And I had never seen that. And if we as a country, we can stay grounded in conservative policies and tradition, but if we can maintain a dialogue and if we can work together, that was my first impression of it. But Chairman, what do you take explain what the committee maybe was for some of those that don't understand?
Yeah, so in the spring of last year, the Speaker Phelan appointed a interim select committee on criminal justice reform. He appointed me chair of the committee. Good friend Joe Moody, who's a Democrat from El Paso, as vice chairman. David Cook, who now vice chair of the Criminal Jurisprudence Committee, was there, and then Brett, as he mentioned, was the only private member on the committee. I'm so grateful that you were. What a unique and powerful perspective you offered. And so the Speaker appointed that committee because the Speaker believes, to his credit, very strongly in criminal justice reform. And the Texas House, last session under his leadership, passed what I would consider to be landmark, historic, transformative criminal justice reforms. And unfortunately, most of those bills, which were voted on overwhelmingly by the Texas House, we're talking votes that were like 147 to 0, 145 to 2. I mean, these are common sense reforms that, like I said earlier, protect the rights and liberties of the people. These are good, strong, I would say necessary reforms. And they went over to the Senate, and they met, most of them, a very quick death. Most of them didn't even get referred to committee, didn't get committee hearings, didn't get votes, certainly didn't get to the governor's desk. I and the members of the House and the Speaker were none too pleased at that. I wasn't at the lunch today, but I've heard all about the Lieutenant Governor's remarks about the Speaker. And that's fine. House-Senate politics during this time of session can distract us. It's not going to distract us in the House. But I will say that criminal justice reform, the House will lead this session again, and we expect the Senate to lock arms with us and to at least give us hearings on some of these things. And I don't have any summer plans right now either. I would remind my Senate colleagues that all of their bills, all of their priorities have to actually pass the House too. And so hopefully we can work together on some of these things. The interim committee that the Speaker formed was to foster a conversation in advance of this session. That first hearing, I know I'm being long-winded. I'll wrap this up quickly.
But
that first
don't
hearing
need to.
where we prayed in the back room together, the first hearing that I called was a hearing that was on one issue alone and one person alone, and that was the pending execution of Melissa Lucio. And I'm a death penalty supporter in the most heinous cases. The vast majority of my colleagues in the House are as well. But Miss Lucio, I believe with all my heart, was innocent. She was days away from being executed, and we felt it incumbent upon us as a committee is to step up and to find answers and to speak up on her behalf. Thankfully, we were able to stop her execution, to stop her from, let's not mince words, being murdered by the state of Texas. And I believe that here in the next few months, because of what we did, not what I did, but because of what we did together, Miss Lucio is going to be back home with her family. And that's a great win for conservatives and so and for our committee.
Well said, Representative Cook.
There's not much to add to that. Like you said, that was a very complete answer. Only thing I would correct, and I know it's not a good idea to correct a chairman, right? But the only thing I would correct him on is it was this guy right here. Your leadership was unquestionably was what took place there and resulted, almost single-handedly. I mean, you brought us along, but your leadership was very clear and very direct. And I, on behalf of Ms. Lucio's family, I do want to say thank you, and on behalf of the state of Texas. So thank you.
Yeah, I want to add for context, I get asked, quite often, why do conservatives want to change the criminal justice system? And this is where I say you can't have it both ways. You can't be afraid of the rise in violent crime and be ignorant to what the criminal justice system is doing and also not want to change it. The criminal justice system right now, let me give you a perspective of the last study that came out. Recidivism rate within 10 years is at 82% across the country. So within 10 years of being incarcerated, 82% are recommitting a crime. If we had a business or a government agency that was failing 80% of the time, would we not take drastic measures, change things, do an overhaul, or get rid of it? There's not a business out there that would operate on 80% failure. That's what's happening, because if you measure the criminal justice system, the most important area of measurement is, are our citizens being safe? Are we decreasing the crime rate? Are we decreasing recidivism rate? And so you're at 80 plus percent in this country. So then you start to see eyes, heads nod and eyes open when they think about the fact that 1 in 3 in this country have a criminal record. 1 in 3. So what that means is the criminal justice system is impacting a lot of people. And if you see crime that's out of control, or you see a rise in violent crime, or you see individuals getting out of our prison system and they're recommitting crime, that's a message to conservatives out there. You've got to step up, and you've got to engage on this. Tell me what, outside of what you have shared, what you prepared a report for the interim committee. What does it conclude, and how is it going to drive what you do over the next several weeks?
Well, obviously, Chairman Leach was at the helm and prepared initial drafts of the report, and what I liked about it is he gave the members, and including yourself, an opportunity to contribute, and I think what it really gave us an opportunity to do was to identify different topics. And so, like I said earlier, whether you're looking at workforce issues or, we talked about death penalty, there's lots of different areas in the criminal justice realm that we can talk about. And that's what I really think that the report spoke to is getting into not only, identifying the areas of work that we need to take up this session, but also giving specific ideas within each one of those categories. And so, one of the things that was an anomaly for me at first was something as simple as the Fair Chance Hiring Act. And so, that's one, again, where we're giving opportunities for, people that are coming out of prison to go straight into a job. And then, like, as you talked about, with 1/3 of our population being affected by some type of criminal background or criminal experience on their record, one of the things that you really look at is with regard to their ability to obtain employment. And so this sounds like when you first talk to someone, because I've had conversations with a lot of people, and when I first bring it up, I kind of feel like I have 3 heads that they're looking at or something of that sort. But what it says is that a public employer cannot pull a criminal justice background check on a prospective employee until after they've made a conditional offer. And so first you're like, that just doesn't bode well. And there's obviously some exceptions with law enforcement and schools, school personnel, things like that. But it's a really different concept. And so, as you talked about earlier, Brett, your experience in D.C., it's, you don't see a whole lot of bipartisanship in D.C. And we do have, more of that here in Texas. But
that may be because you're Democrats are Republicans in a lot of other states.
Yeah,
Some of them.
Well said. But this actually was passed and signed into law at the federal level in December of 2019 under President Trump's leadership. And so, if they can do that in D.C., it's certainly something that we can and will do here in Texas. And so, but serving on the committee just gave me an opportunity to learn. Obviously, Chairman Leach has been at this longer than I have with regard to criminal justice reform, but just watching him and experiencing the different areas that we can make an impact on in criminal justice reform has been very enlightening to me, and I just look forward to continuing to identify specific areas that we can make an impact on.
That's well said. The only thing I'll add is, and I know there's a question that we were supposed to prepare for, and I'll go ahead and jump into it. One of the issues that we discussed, and I actually believe that when you look at all of the issues that we're dealing with this session, and this policy orientation is talking about a ton of them: tax reform, school choice, property tax cuts, healthcare. You talk about all of the big challenges that we have in this state. I would say that one of the most pressing challenges, problems, increasingly, not only in the state of Texas, but nationally, that we absolutely have to address this session is prosecutorial misconduct. And prosecutors increasingly who at the local level are thumbing their nose at the legislature, who are ignoring state laws, who are proudly ignoring state laws, who are campaigning and getting elected on in their primaries, in their big cities, on not following state laws. The legislature is duly elected to, we actually take an oath, just like our prosecutors do, to uphold the laws of this state and of this nation, the Constitution of the United States and of the state of Texas. And when the legislature passes laws, we expect those laws to be enforced, whether a prosecutor agrees with them or disagrees with them. The legislature is elected to come together for 5 months every 2 years. Some wish it were 2 months every 140 years, But we come together, we pass laws, and we expect our prosecutors to enforce those. And when we have the prosecutors in Travis County and Harris County and Dallas County and other places across the state issuing press releases from their office saying, or signing on to letters nationally with other prosecutors from other states saying, we don't agree with this bill the legislature passed and we're not going to enforce it. That is I'm going to use the term, that is a bastardization of the very rule of law itself. That is attacking the very foundations of our system of government. The rule of law in its entirety is jeopardized when our prosecutors are allowed to do that. Both Representative Cook and I have introduced legislation, as well as a number of other representatives and senators to crack down on that. But it's a huge priority this session, and we have to get it done.
David, I want to get your take on that as well, as I know you have. And I want to just mention, having spent over a decade as a prosecutor, there were many cases that I had where I didn't really like the law. I had to enforce it. And when I was U.S. attorney, I remember giving speeches to my troops. There are going to be cases that are brought to you by some of your agents, and you're going to look at them, and you might technically have a case, and you might exercise your discretion and not bring it. But remember, every time you do that, if you start doing it as a habit on a particular type of crime, that agent is no longer going to talk to you about it. They're not going to bring that to you. But even worse, which I never thought was going to happen, was what you're referring to. These prosecutors are coming in and they're announcing to the world, we're not going to prosecute these cases because we disagree with it. What does that do to the community? What message does it send? And is it any coincidence we're seeing rise in crime, for example, when they said we won't prosecute theft of amounts up to this amount? What happened? They started stealing everything as much as they could. And we see the video and we're horrified. But we're creating that by electing individuals. And I've heard people say, well, just don't elect them. That's how you win this argument. Well, it's not. It's not how you do it, because they can sit in that office for a long time, and they can sit in a pocket, and they can flout what the legislature is doing in a state like Texas even. David?
Yeah, I would agree. It's not a matter of waiting for them to conclude their office. I think it's a matter of removal of office, and I think that's what the bills, most of the bills that you're going to see, that's what they focus on is removing and or fining an individual in that situation. And I think they've kind of already got the message loud and clear, and some of them have started walking it back. I'm from Tarrant County, and the district attorney in Dallas County is the one I think that Brett was probably referring to, but he literally had a policy that said if a theft was under $750, that he would just blanket immunity to all of these criminals. We're going to give blanket immunity to all of these criminals, that we're not going to prosecute those cases. And so after a period of time, I think he withdrew that and thought it was not a great idea. But just the fact that you have prosecutors that are empowering or encouraging crime and criminals is just not where we need to be in Texas. And it's just the opposite, just like Brett and Jeff both have said, is it needs to be a rule of law in Texas, and not empowering criminals to do so. And so there's a couple different ways that different ways to attack it. The first bill that I filed was HB 1350, and what it did is it empowered the Attorney General to be able to come in into any county where this type of action was being taken by a criminal district attorney or a county attorney, and so it empowered the Attorney General to come in and remove and or fine prosecutor that was taking that type of action. And shortly after I filed the bill, without getting into too much specifically, but our Attorney General has recently resolved and settled a case, and which will be brought to the legislature for I guess approval, so to speak, with regard to the dollars that have been agreed upon. And so I don't know what the outcome of that bill would be. And so really I started asking around and talking to other quite frankly, other district attorneys, and just getting ideas. And so there's a section in the local government code, section 87, that already talks about removal. And so there's a process for this, but it doesn't have really the teeth, and it talks about a lot of other officers within a county, county attorneys, judges, district clerk, county clerk, all of these different individuals. And so what we really tried to do is start looking at the current law and looking to see what we can do. And so today I filed a bill 3307, just got it filed today. And so the approach there is to make specific provisions and to really, to Chairman Leach's point a while ago, really what this is official misconduct. And so what we're doing is expanding the definition of what official misconduct is to include these types of blanket statements where we're not going to prosecute. And so, I was a little bitty, itty-bitty city prosecutor many years ago in the beginning of my legal career, and I recognize and relish the importance of prosecutorial discretion and acknowledge that it's absolutely necessary, but they're not exercising prosecutorial discretion by making blanket statements. And so I want to make it clear, and I have made it clear every time I've spoken on this issue, that I want to make sure that the district attorneys have their prosecutorial discretion, but they're not making these blanket statements. And so regardless of which bill gets moved, that needs to be the end result, so that this type of ridiculous behavior is eliminated.
Yeah, because what I see some cities across this country where DAs have been elected that have come in, and they're coming in on the notion that the police are bad, our criminal justice system is evil, and we got to abolish all of it. And it's to me, you're almost like watching a train wreck. At what point are they going to start saying, wait a minute, there really is violent crime, and we really do have to protect our citizenry? But from most of the outside of Texas in this discussion, a lot of these cities are dealing with the pushback is you don't want to rein in your DAs because they've got to have discretion. So how are you going to preserve that discretion that you're talking about that we respect, while at the same time are they going to be afraid of being removed from office for exercising that discretion?
Well, we believe it's a fundamental principle that in prosecutorial discretion on a case-by-case basis. But when you're saying carte blanche, this entire class of crimes we're not going to enforce, that is not prosecutorial discretion. That is willful neglect of duty. And what we're seeing, one of the real challenges on the ground is in Democrat primaries in really dark blue areas. We're actually seeing when they're campaigning in their primaries. So you've got two, let's say, Democrat opponents running for district attorney. Well, a group, an organization will come in and have them sign a pledge, and they'll campaign on it. I signed a pledge not to enforce the Texas Heartbeat Act. And they've signed on to letters. Some of our major urban district attorneys in this state have signed on to letters with other national district attorneys saying, we disagree with what the legislature did on the Texas Heartbeat Act, and we hereby pledge that when elected, we will not enforce it. Essentially creating sanctuaries for abortion in their communities. Well, they may disagree with the Heartbeat Act, but to publicly state, in conjunction with George Soros and other radical progressive district attorneys from across the state, that here's what we're going to do in response to what the legislature did, we're just going to ignore the law. That is, in my opinion, an impeachable offense. And so we're going to do anything and everything necessary to protect prosecutorial discretion on a case-by-case basis, but also to hold these guys accountable and to make sure that they're doing their job. At the very least, just don't publicly announce it. Don't issue a press release. We're cracking down on them, and they know it. I don't know about you, but they've been in my office, coming to the table, working with us on it. So we'll get something done this session.
Yeah, so I've had many of those same meetings as he's referring to, and I've actually incorporated some of that language into the bill. Because sometimes, there may be a situation where the Court of Appeals has made some type of ruling, or if there's maybe a court order that precludes maybe there's a temporary pause on a law that's, if there's an attack on it or something like that. So there's obviously needs to be exceptions, but the main thing is making sure that it's on a case-by-case basis. And during the interim, when we had different hearings across the summer and things like that, there was a professor from SMU that came down, and we had lots of discussion with her about it, and she gave good testimony to the panel about what is and what is not prosecutorial discretion, and it's really common sense. I mean, we know what is and what is not a blanket ban for criminals to go out and commit crimes. And so, I felt like, in asking her questions, I felt like she did a really good job of just making it crystal clear. And so I just think again, whatever policy gets established, it needs to be very clear that we want to empower criminal district attorneys to enforce the law. And if they want to change the law, then they need to come up here and run against Jeff or myself and become a legislator, not run for criminal district attorney.
Well, and it could go both ways. Last session, by way of another example, we passed a dog tethering bill. It was pretty controversial. Actually, many rural Republicans voted against the bill relating to when you can and in what instances you can chain a dog to a tree. And some of our more rural Republicans, a lot of ranch and landowners, farm owners said, well, we need the ability to, in certain cases, chain a dog to a tree, not because we hate the dog, but because it's necessary for the protection of our livestock. And so they voted against the bill, which is fine. But it's the law of the land now. There are restrictions on dog tethering. Well, if a Republican district attorney in, let's say, West Texas or Smith County in East Texas said, man, I feel like my constituents hate that bill, I'm going to announce we're not going to enforce the dog tethering bill in our area. That's another example of how a Republican district attorney could willfully neglect his duty to enforce state laws. It goes both ways, and on both sides, it's wrong.
Yeah, it's a great point, and one that fits into something I've been speaking on for a long time, which is there's never an area of the government that has escaped more accountability than the criminal justice system, and nothing more in that system than prosecutors' power. There's very little transparency, and there's very little way to hold them accountable. So for the prosecutor right now that you're concerned isn't going to enforce certain laws that you pass, you also have prosecutors that will cheat and steal to try to win a case when they know they don't have the facts to support it, or the law isn't there to support it. And we see it go both ways. And so what I want to see, and why I love Right on Crime, is we're not here to say, let's not be tough on the violent criminal. What we're here to say is, let's make our government accountable to us as the people, and let's make sure that they're doing what we want them to do. And the only way you're going to do it is if you have legislators that are saying, okay, I'm willing to look at the criminal justice system. We're not just going to pump money into it. We'll look at it and we'll make them accountable. So I love that. Next, maybe the last area I want to talk about is a bit what you raised, Representative Cook. You talk about the workforce need. I'm always encouraged to see businesses come to the table and start to realize, when I talk to them, they say some of their best employees have been those that have been incarcerated, right? Well, now with 1 in 3 with a criminal history, pretty soon that's all that we're going to be hiring if we continue on this trajectory. But how do you get, how important is reentry or focusing on allowing for opportunities for these folks coming out, and how do we do that through the legislature?
Well, it's absolutely essential. Otherwise we're just going to keep sitting them back, right? If they don't have a job, a place to stay, when they're coming out of the system, then the chance of them going back in behind bars is extremely high. I took a trip to, I believe it's the Hughes unit just north of Austin here, maybe 3 or 4 months ago, and I was really very impressed with the programs that are within the 4 walls of the prison system. When we see it on TV, we just see a bunch of jail cells, and you don't really see any of the programs. And the programs that they have available for the inmates are very encouraging. And, as far as prospective employers, employers actually have the ability to interview inmates while they're in prison. One of the good things that come out of COVID, we all know, is Zoom. And so they actually are conducting interviews via Zoom. And so we've got great personnel within TDCJ that are setting those programs up, and it's just, common sense, right? And so if we have common sense solutions to common sense problems, we're going to get good results. And so just kind of get government out of the way. But it really does. It was an eye-opening experience during the interim when we had, and especially the employer that it was, and I believe it was Chase Bank. Is that right? Yeah. And their governmental relations person for Chase Bank come in and started talking about just what they have done. And so you're talking about criminal justice reform leaders is someone like that, a private business, Brett, like you talked about, to where they're coming in and telling us, what they're already doing in the private sector. And so that's something that it's a great practical tool, but it's just one of many. So we need to put a lot more tools in the toolbox to ensure that these folks have ample opportunity when they get out. And so back to the trip that I took to the Hughes unit, one of the things that I was most impressed that I saw was that there was actually a church within the prison system, and they had the ability to become a pastor while they were within the prison system. And so I met four individuals that, and two, they were part of the cartel. I mean, from previously, and so had been saved, found the Lord. We're now practicing ministers within the prison system, and they literally had a church that was probably about twice the size of this room right here, and they said they were packing it out with inmates, and so it gives them an opportunity to come in. But that's just one example. I mean, obviously they make a lot of chairs and tables. There's lots of different trades that the folks have an opportunity to get their hands on, so to speak, so that they can develop a trade, so that when they get out, they can be prepared for different jobs. And so that's what I want to encourage. I mean, I really think that's where the business side of my brain comes in. Is like I said, the first reason you want to do criminal justice reform is for the humanitarian side, and that's because that's the right thing to do, right? And so, but when you can actually make an impact on the future of these individuals, which also impacts positively on the economy, I think that's just a win-win for Texas and for all of us in society.
Yeah, we have next year over 50,000 able-bodied men and women will be released from incarceration that are of working age, that desire to work, not just to find a job, but to find a career and meaning. Many of whom are going to be back home with their kids. They're able to be tax-paying citizens again. And you look at the industries where we have massive worker shortages and workforce challenges in the state. Look at construction. Look at truck drivers. In industrial, we have plumbing. We have welding. All of these industries that are in massive need. They're begging for workers. And we've got this pipeline of workers who are ready and willing, and I think probably more than any other population, eager to get back to work. And so there are things we can do to train them, to educate them, to invest in them as they're approaching their release date. One of the bills that I've filed will build on what we've done in the past. There are some occupational licensing restrictions in Texas, some bureaucratic red tape that makes it really hard for us to get someone ready to be a truck driver, to work in construction. And so what we're doing now is to try to get the occupational licensing process, all the paperwork, all the bureaucratic stuff that they got to do. I mean, I'd love to do away with a lot of it, but if they do have to fill out paperwork, if they do have to apply for a license, they should be able to do so maybe that last year when they're incarcerated, to get ready, so that when they're out, those first few days, those first few weeks, that first 90 days is so important. If they get back to work, if they get back with their families, if they get that first paycheck, the chances of them being back in a unit, back into a life of crime, falling back in with the same people who led them to commit crimes is very, very, very small. And what a great benefit it would be to the people and to the economy of Texas.
Yeah, so well said. I can't really add anything to that. I will just say that the interim committee was unique and it was powerful, and it taught us, I think, many lessons about the criminal justice system. But there's still a lot of education to do. There's a lot of, even among members on the committee and others, I mean, sometimes where you stand on an issue really depends on where you sit. And if you don't have voices, if you don't have your constituents, if you don't have people saying, hey, I want you to analyze this and look at this. You take, for example, the air conditioning thing. I hadn't really focused a lot until we had testimony about how important air conditioning in your prison system is, not just for because you care about another human being or the compassionate thing. You have safety issues. You also have recidivism goes down when they have air conditioning, especially I can't even imagine in Texas, you know, and you then, you know, you learn, and you could see representatives learning and getting past that feeling of, well, they just need to be miserable because they've committed crimes and they just need to be miserable. Well, is our goal to reduce crime, and is it to produce individuals when they leave that are able to function and we're not going to have them back?
Yeah, one of our committee members, God bless him, he's just a great guy. I won't mention his name. It's not him or him. You know, he's just against. We talk about the issue of air conditioning in our prison units, and he said, Why do we need to provide air conditioning for inmates? They deserve to be there. They shouldn't. They don't deserve air conditioning. Let's make it as miserable as possible. We got other stuff to spend money on. And then the point was made, well, you realize that staff and prison guards are necessary. We have a massive shortage of guards and staffers. We're literally begging people to come provide security to be guards at prisons. You think they want to work in those environments? And he said, okay, all right, I get it now. And he changed his mind like that. So I'm happy he asked the right questions, but he was willing, like I think we all should be, to learn and to maybe not be so resolute in our longly held positions when it comes to doing the right thing.
And we wouldn't have had that and many moments like that without this committee, your leadership, the willing to just have the discussion. It was unique. I'm really hoping that the rest of the country will look at this and say, once again, you know, we're gonna take the lead of Texas, and I'm looking forward to that. So, any last words or predictions, and then we'll open it up for some questions.
My prediction is we're not going to be here this summer. We're going to get our work done by sine die, and my prediction is the House and the Senate is going to come together and get our work done and get back home.
Yeah. I think just the common theme that I would say is take the politics out of this equation. I mean, obviously, politics is part of the election process, but when you get down here, I mean, it's really looking, you know, even within our party, you know, it's like what Jeff's is saying. I mean, you know, it's going to be largely dependent upon not only, you know, Republicans working with Democrats, but also Republicans working with other Republicans. And so I think the leadership of, you know, obviously our big three have all made, you know, something like prosecutorial discretion or reining in rogue DAs, and they've made that a priority, but it's up to legislators to come together and find the good policy that we can all agree upon, or at least a majority agree upon, and that we can get it through both chambers and to the governor's desk, regardless of what the topic is. But I think that, you know, it starts with an open mind and being willing to listen, and kind of like you said, I guess sometimes the perspective depends on where you're sitting. So that's well said, and I appreciate the opportunity to serve the state of Texas, and it really has. I mean, what I have found myself doing in my being my second session is really trying to listen and be somewhat reactive. I mean, obviously there are things you're going to be proactive on, but for a lot of times I'm trying to be reactive to what the situation is, and that's really what the criminal justice reform experience, you know, that committee assignment did for me, was give me an opportunity to just to sit and listen and you know, just learn from the people that Chairman Leach and others were bringing to the committee. So I just want to say thank you for the opportunity to Speaker Dave Phelan for allowing me to serve on the committee, but also to your leadership, Jeff, and you did a great job. And Brett, look forward to working with you and Right on Crime. And thanks for what y'all are doing and leading in Texas. And then, like you said, this will be an example that all of the U.S. can be proud of. So, and I think that, you know, it takes organizations. I mean, it's not, you know, this is a, you know, it's dealing with criminals, you know, this criminal justice system, but it takes, you know, good common sense, and it takes people willing to not only put their money into it, but also their time into it, and that's why we need more people like, you know, Doug Deason, that has, I guarantee, a lot more things he could be doing instead of down here in Austin working with a bunch of legislators on being right on crime, right? So thank y'all for the opportunity to be here today.
Thank you. Well said. I just want to, we'll open it up for some questions, but I do want to say, Representative Cook, that Doug and Jeff and I have spoken, and we would like to make you a member of the Bearded Brother Club, and you know, we're happy to include you. We think you'd look nice.
I need a little more notice next time. But,
let's have some questions. I don't know if someone has the microphone to pass around. You see hands, go ahead.
I talk loud anyway. Okay, so I had a unique career path where I was in law enforcement. Then I trained previously incarcerated prisoners on technical expertise and got to see the outcome. So here's kind of what I saw from my view. There are people who live in a different reality than we do. They are recidivist crime over and over, no matter how many times they're processed, they come right back. I trained a lot of younger people that were going to be released soon from a prison on technical trades. And one great way to help people get air conditioning in the prisons is start an air conditioning school in the prison and have them do the maintenance on the air conditioner. And so they get funds for the equipment. Anyway, so what my experience was that 84%, when the numbers were all shaken out over 3 years, of the students went on to productive work. But the others, one stole from one of the first job sites because we'd actually take them out on a job site and train them. But we also videotaped what was going on so we could see when they were alone what would happen. They stole from the homeowner or from the business. And then as well, we had 2 students that one was killed and one was hospitalized for a very lengthy period of time because they went out on break and got drunk and drove into a telephone pole because they just weren't ready to function. Now, the thing that I've always wondered about is with all these get the prisoners back to work, is that how prepared are they and how prepared would their employer be with a profile on that person that they will be hiring? Because if it was a minor infraction, if it was a first-time offense, it's a lot different than someone who, as you said, came up to this country to commit crime and was through the school, a hard school, of criminality. Their chance of recidivism is much higher, and the risk to the employer much greater. And that doesn't seem to be getting much airtime of how the decisions that are made on their employment and their ability to get going. You mentioned a great thing. They used to knock people out of county jails after some long-term sentences without a driver's license or a way to get one. So they couldn't go to work. And now that's slowly being corrected.
So I want to get to your question.
What are your thoughts on all that?
Love it.
Are you a lawyer?
I love it.
I guess I'll take up the HVAC example. That is occurring, at least from a service perspective, and so I do want to encourage, if you have the opportunity to tour anyone in here, have the opportunity to tour. It's very impressive at what they're doing, and there are no guarantees in life, right? If these individuals are getting out and coming back into society, we as society are a whole lot better off if we're doing everything we can do to ensure that they do have a job and that they have housing and they have transportation. I'm not implying that government pays for that, but that we give them a pathway. And so I think that it's incumbent upon TDCJ to make those investments, which is, I think was your point, was making sure that those programs are available. And I would just tell you that they are available in TDCJ. I could probably tell you 10 good things they're doing. I'm sure someone else could tell you there's 10 things that they're doing wrong. But I do want to applaud TDCJ with what they're doing with regard to reentry programs. They're doing a really good job.
I wanted to just say thank you so much for your time today. And I won't take too much of it because I know that there are other people that want to ask some questions. And I won't even go into my professional pedigree because I've been exposed to a lot. as far as case management and working in that capacity. I also served at the 2013 legislature with a representative, Sylvester Turner. And so I was able to see just how, as far as the criminal justice pathway is concerned, I was able to see both sides. One of the pieces that I would say is modify LexisNexis access. And I'm sure you probably know what that is, right? The other piece is that the mental health piece is critical. We can't, even, in the capacity that I was in as a case manager, they're like, oh, get them to suit up and boot up. You can't do that. It's not that simple. And in order to make that transition into the workforce, we have to be able to put some money into mental health counseling, because there is a transition that has to happen. There's a fallout that happens. And so when they're segueing back into society, it's not that easy. The expectation is to be, at top level to do that. And that expectation isn't realistic. The other piece would be prosecution. I know that in Indiana, I think it's like 30% off the top monetarily that they get for every prosecution. I'm not quite sure what it is here in Texas, but I think really the core of this is mental health services to support that segue. And then, we talk about the jobs inside the prisons, right? Because we know that we're the third largest state. We have the third largest population, I think, overpopulation in the country. So I just would say, just as a support, and it's probably more of a statement than it is a question, because I did the LexisNexis thing, right? But I really believe that segue will help, because I think the transition, and then we also have to have, as far as wages are concerned, right? They have to be comparable to the cost of living. So we're really talking about that segue from that prison pipeline into workforce, and making sure that if we're really true to this and authentic to it, right? And bringing authenticity and integrity back to the process, this is probably what we need to do in order to bridge that divide so that it can work on behalf of Texas, right? If we're really true to it. So thank you.
I agree. Well said.
I actually have a question. I live in Harris County, and in Harris County, because so few people who are arrested for a felony are not plea bargained down to a misdemeanor. Is there anything in what you're doing that will address that? It's not a blanket thing that says we won't prosecute any felonies, so it won't fall under what you're talking about. But we have our system that refuses to address most felonies as felonies. Can you do anything about that?
I don't have a bill that's, and I don't know that I understand exactly what your question is, but I'll go back to one of the, y'all remember this, we had a sheriff from Chambers County, I believe it was, and my understanding is that that's immediately south. I may be challenged on the direction, but I think it's immediately south of Harris County. But the Cadillac converters are something that's popular for thieves to steal, and so and this is more of a bail reform issue that I'm bringing, but I think it kind of ties into your question. But the criminals would literally, if they saw that, once they realized that they had gotten outside of Harris County into another county and they were actually going to be prosecuted, it literally was a deterrent. And so, I understand your position and your comment, which is a felony is a felony and it's a felony, right? And so I think that, obviously, I would never file something that would take away that prosecutorial discretion, for a prosecutor, because he or she does have to look at each case on a case-by-case basis. And so I think that's just, part of it. But if it's a blanket policy, then that's definitely a problem. That is something that the bills that Chairman Leach and I have filed and others have filed that would be going towards that issue.
One of the issues with Harris County and what's going on to address what you're doing, you're talking about, when you have bad policies at the front end, meaning your position on bail, for example, is we won't hold anybody that's dangerous. We're just going to let everybody out. what's happening is they get out and then they're committing a crime, right? So what you're doing is you're doubling and tripling your caseload as a prosecutor. Once your caseload is that high, I'm going to tell you, I've been with a high caseload, and without plea bargaining, I would have just curled up in a ball and never been able to get any case moved across my desk. But that's not the right way to do it. The right way to do it then is to look at your policies from beginning to end of the criminal justice system, and are we implementing a policy based on emotion like the bail policies, and is it actually resulting in more crime in our community? And if it is, then you get more arrests and you get more pressure on that criminal justice system. So for me, the answer is not a one specific bill that could be filed. You have to, as Harris County, say, we're tired of it, and we're going to elect some folks that are going to start looking at all of the different points in the criminal justice system that are contributing to it. That's my take on it.
Gentlemen, this question is for all three of y'all. We've seen a rise in crime in the last 3 to 4 years in this country, but even before that, we've seen a rise in at least consideration for criminal justice reform. My question is, a lot of the actions that you guys spoke to earlier with the Democratic DAs and how they've treated what they consider criminal justice reform and how that's contributed to the rise in crime, does that do damage to your ability to put in these necessary reforms and sell it to conservative audiences that, might associate a rise in crime with criminal justice reform because it's done wrongly? So,
Yeah, it's a great question, and the simple and short answer is the major, where you see the major spikes in crime are usually in areas where you have city or community leaders who are refusing to or withdrawing support for the law enforcement, for police officers, and in communities where there's a partnership between the elected officials and the police officers, where the police officers, the law enforcement have the support, not just in word, we support law enforcement, but actually supporting law enforcement, giving them pay raises, giving them the resources and the tools they need to do their job, like in Dallas right now. If you're not paying attention to what's happening in Dallas, you should be. We've got a Democrat mayor, Eric Johnson, who I was blessed to serve with in the legislature. He could be a Republican if he wanted to be. And he's got a great new partnership with Chief Garcia in the Dallas Police Department. And there's some great things happening in Dallas when it comes to the crime rate. So I would say that then you look at Austin, where they've run from the support of police, and look at what's happening here. And so where you've got city leaders, prosecutors, and law enforcement that are working together and collaborating together, we're seeing crime rates go down.
Yeah, I mean, I think your question is well stated, and I do think that having those types of actions that we're seeing from, say, a DA that's giving blanket immunity to criminals is something that would we can all get frustrated, right? And so I think that's kind of the crux of your question is that does that make it harder for on us as elected officials? And for me, it just encourages me. I mean, it doesn't make it harder. It gives me more encouragement to make the effort to get done what needs to be done.
Yeah, and I'll just add, across the country, the narrative is causing issues, right? The change in the narrative, the belief that those that wanted to just warehouse criminals and throw away the key, and that's their only solution to crime, they're the ones that are they're not more in number, they're just more loud now because they feel like the rise in crime is their moment to say, see, any of these criminal justice reforms, this is what you get. Well, the reality is you get it because of the things that these representatives have identified. You get it when you implement a policy that is based on emotion, like New York, when they said, we're no longer going to lock anybody up that we arrest. Well, that's brilliant. Good work on that policy decision. It came as a result of emotion and politics of the day. And now the citizens of the communities are saying, wait, this is not what we want. If there's someone dangerous, we need to lock them up. And so you'll get back to common sense, and you'll get back to people being willing to, I think, engage. But don't move your ship just because everyone else pulled their anchor and is floating around all around you. Make sure you stay anchored on good, sound policies. And you can still embrace the police and support them and at the same time say, hey, we need to make some changes because they need to be prepared to handle mental illness better, and we need to train them better, and we need to provide them opportunities to become better officers so we don't have, situations like we've seen the riots were a result of.
I'm Leslie Fitzpatrick. I'm a former prosecutor, criminal defense lawyer, served on the board for the Texas Association of Specialty Courts, and You're Right on Crime helped to get some prisons closed down because those programs work. Ann Richards was our governor back in '94. She was in recovery, started some great recovery programs in our prison systems. What we have right now is not what we need. Getting a job is great, but kind of like the woman stated, if you're not addressing underlying causes and conditions, mental health, substance use, alcohol addiction, is there any way during this reform that you are looking at that y'all can take a look at the treatment that we are providing our offenders in the criminal justice system right now? Because it is not what it could be or what it should be to prepare them to be successful. Just like somebody said, they had a wreck, DWI. So my hope is that whatever bills y'all are trying to get passed, that you take a look at the services. Although they're good, they really need to be better to adequately prepare these people to be successful and not commit future crimes.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. That's well said, and it was well said earlier too. I like to say on this area we've accomplished so much, but we haven't come this far to only come this far. We have so much more to do, and investing in mental health, like I said, not just finding jobs for people, but finding careers, finding a calling if we can, making sure that they're healthy mentally and otherwise when they get out. That takes programs, and it also takes investment of state dollars. And we're spending more on TDCJ on these efforts now than we ever have. Not necessarily just on locking people up. We've actually closed units, as you mentioned, but we're investing more than we ever have. And those investments, I believe, are paying off, but we shouldn't rest. We got to do more.
I agree. Have to do more there, but I would also add the other committee that I serve on is juvenile justice family issues, and so really it's a matter of starting early, because these, they actually have some kids as young as 10 or 11 years old that are in a juvenile facility, and so the consistent testimony that we heard during the interim with regard to juvenile justice is that the closer these kids are to their community, the more successful they're going to be within their programs. And so that's really what I've been trying to push with regard to the dollars that are being spent with regard to the younger generation, with regard to the juveniles, is making sure that as much as possible that those kids have an opportunity to be in a program that's close to their community so that their family can be involved. And if you have family involvement, that's going to increase their ability of trying to be successful as they come out of a juvenile facility. And so there's really a big push right now. I think in the base budget, HB1, there's like $200 million that's been set aside with regard to juvenile, for juvenile justice issues. And so the question is are you going to build facilities that are more statewide, or are you going to spend dollars at the local level? And my position is it should be spent as much as possible at the local levels where the state is partnering with counties throughout Texas, Tarrant County, Dallas County, Lubbock County, the leaders in juvenile justice reform, the ones that are doing a good job. Those programs need to be highlighted and partnered with the state of Texas so that we can have better reform and better results with regard to these kids, because that's really if we start there, that's really where we have a chance to make an impact on the adult prison system.
Well, I can't emphasize that enough, and I'll tell you, my father was a law enforcement officer in California, in Los Angeles County, and he left that, retired from that to become a teacher because he felt like he wasn't getting to the kids soon enough. The messages, he wasn't helping. He thought if your only role is to arrest and to, try to supervise those that are in the criminal justice system, you're probably not feeling like you're getting to them soon enough. So I applaud that. I'm really glad to hear you kind of identify that. It was an aha moment for me on that. Yeah, other questions? We got about 5 minutes.
So I have kind of become an advocate specifically about conditions for inmates. 5 years ago, my father actually passed away due to being medically neglected while incarcerated in Arizona. And so what I'm seeing here locally, I've actually testified in Bexar County Commissioner's Court specifically related to conditions in their county jail. And so what from a state level can you do to ensure that the counties are doing what they need to do to make sure inmates are in humane conditions?
Well, there's a lot we can do. I'd like to learn more about the specific situation in Bexar County. I know that in Collin County, we've got a great sheriff, we've got a great jail in Collin County, but it's not without its holes and challenges and weaknesses. And so we partner with our local elected officials, but knowledge is power. If we don't know about it, if people aren't communicating with us, it's not a problem we can fix. So I'd love to learn more. I know I'm not your state representative. You said in Bexar County, is that right? Talk to us about it. And not everything needs a bill. Not everything needs legislation. Sometimes a phone call, a meeting, a threatening tweet can get someone's
especially from
attention.
Jeff Leach.
A hearing,
Yeah, so
right?
a hearing. Seriously. So we'll talk afterwards.
And we have probably, I know the sheriff there really well, and he's 23 down, and he can't hire jailers because of the pay and the conditions in the prison. I mean, in the local jails, and obviously that's where we're failing first before we go to the state-run jails. Any thoughts on that?
The base budget, really shortly, the base budget includes I don't want to say substantial, but a very good pay increase for jailers. And we talked earlier about prison conditions. It's not just about inmates, it's about the folks who work there. And 23, you said, is the shortage. I mean, that's bad, but that's actually better than a lot of other parts across the state where there's some units that have hundreds of, that are short hundreds of guards and officials. So we've got a pay raise, we've got better conditions, and I think this session's going to be real good for that area.
Yeah, and I would just add to that the same is true with regard to the juvenile facilities, because they even have greater challenges there. You know, at the beginning of this discussion today, we talked about workforce issues, and so the juvenile justice system has had major issues with regard to obtaining and retaining jailers, and they've already implemented a 5% increase, and I believe that there's 10% more that they're going to get to, and so it is a matter of just trying to get them up, because you know, it is what I'm told is more difficult than working with the adult criminal justice system is working in the juvenile facilities, and so it's a good issue to talk about, and I do believe that there is light being shined on that issue, and you'll continue to see improvement with regard to the dollars and cents.
Well, let me thank each of our panelists and for them being here. Very appreciative of their time. This is the middle of session. I think it's impressive that they can jump out here and join us. I think it tells you their commitment, and it tells you their passion for this subject. But just in closing, I would reiterate that it really is imperative that you reach out and get your representatives and get your leaders understanding that you want to hold them accountable, and the criminal justice system is no exception. And if we do this and we start to see it across this country, you'll start to see that there's no place for folks that refuse to prosecute, or folks that don't recognize violent crime, and leaders that want to let people out and have a prison or a criminal justice system that is treating some people differently than others, because it should be above politics, and we should be about rehabilitating those that go in. And if they can't be rehabilitated, then they need to stay there. And that's the bright lines that you can draw. Now it's all up to us to do that. So will you please give a special thanks to these two gentlemen, and thank you.